recording. And of course, now it's not giving me the option of going live. I'm going to try pausing this recording and see. Hi, this is Emily Johnston, Vice President of Community Impact at United Way of Olmsted County. I'm here with Courtney Dugstad, Interim Executive Director at Next Chapter Ministries. How are you, Courtney?
Excellent. Good morning, Emily. Happy to be with you.
Yeah, we were just live on Facebook for a moment, so you might have just seen us do this, but we're going to do it again and get this out there for people to see. So, Courtney, can you tell us about Next Chapter Ministries and your mission?
Absolutely. I'll try and use a little bit different words this time too. So, Next Chapter is a local nonprofit. We work specifically with families that are impacted by the cycle of incarceration. Our goal is restoration to God, family, and community. And we offer holistic care for ultimate wellness in those three areas. And how we do that is very unique. And I would love to come on in another time to talk about all three of those pieces. But I know we're here for a very specific piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, United Way proudly supports the Treehouse Program at Next Chapter. So can you tell us what that program entails?
Yeah, absolutely. So Treehouse specifically works with youth that are justice involved. And so that can either mean directly, they themselves have been a part of the juvenile justice system, or somebody in their household, most often a parent, has been involved in the justice system or the cycle of incarceration. Treehouse here in Rochester is actually a partner network of the larger Treehouse organization that was birthed in the Twin Cities and has multiple locations all over the state and then other states as well. And the portion that United Way proudly partners with us on is our peer support group. And so what that looks like is an evidence-based trauma-informed model in which we provide a safe space for teens that have been impacted by the justice system to give and receive support from their peers that understand kind of in a deeper way, maybe some of the challenges and barriers, but also some of the victories that they face that maybe their other peers wouldn't understand. Currently, the peer support group was really started in the juvenile detention center, and we're there 4 different times a week, 4 different days a week, running various groups. And then we also just recently were invited into Phoenix Academy, the ALC, the Alternative Learning Center, and then soon we'll be in John Marshall. And essentially, leadership there makes referrals of their students that they know have been impacted by the cycle of incarceration.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned that the program uses a trauma-informed model, and can you tell our viewers what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of saying before, I don't know if this part made it on Facebook Live, but it's kind of a phrase that people use a lot, and Next Chapter takes it very seriously. We're incredibly intentional about everything we do being trauma-informed. And there's various levels of trauma-informed care, and again, that's something that you and I could probably spend hours talking about. But if I'm simplifying it, it essentially means that we recognize that trauma is a part of the story and that it impacts that person's response to the world. And then the second part of that is how we respond. So we're responding in ways that intentionally lead the path to healing versus re-traumatization. And if you break that down even further, what that practically means is that our facilitators are trained in trauma-informed language, which is very, very important. And if you break that down, that includes positive, future-focused language, making sure we're not labeling, making sure we understand what narrative can cause shame and what narrative really is on future and goals. And then also providing choices whenever possible. And then another portion of that trauma-informed model with the peer support group is how we do it physically. So the teens are in a circle. If one teen is sitting on the floor, we're either all sitting on the floor or we're all sitting in chairs. The chairs are not foldable chairs. They're not temporary. We try and use things, even in the school setting, we try and set up a room that looks as much like a living room as we possibly can, something stable that includes very warm colors and safe spaces designed by the teens themselves.
That's great. So I know you were starting to talk about in your response something, or hinting at in your response, something I know that you do with the youth you work with, which is social emotional skills. So can you tell us why social emotional skills are important for everyone? And what are some of the ways that you support that skill building in the youth you serve?
Yeah, awesome. So social emotional learning by definition is actually the process that we go through to understand and manage emotions, that we set and achieve goals, feeling and showing empathy for others, and then establishing and maintaining positive relationships. So what's not to love about that, right? So SEL skills are actually just the tools that we use to achieve those things. And so basically almost everything we do at Treehouse helps feed into that. So we identify emotions, and having a safe space to own your story is probably the first and most foundational piece of Treehouse. And then after that, we have other reinforcing things. And so we do community activities where we are engaging and encouraging justice-involved youth to maybe engage in activities that they're regularly not exposed to. And then mentoring relationships. And those are both in peer and adults. And those really help walk through the decision-making process, and then reinforce what healthy relationships look like.
So obviously right now we have the COVID-19 crisis that's unfolding in Olmsted County and around the country and around the world. And it's a stressful time for a lot of people, including a lot of young people. So I'm sure we have parents and coaches and mentors and other caring adults who are watching, who are wondering how they best support the young people in their life as they deal with all the uncertainty that's happening now. So can you give us an example of how adults can support young people in exercising and strengthening the types of social emotional skills that you're talking about?
Yes. I have one really important word for that, and that's relationships. At the end of the day, I really believe our humanity will either live or die by how we relate to each other. And so I think teachers can make sure they're bringing elements of relationship building into the distance learning. Parents and caretakers can make sure there are new things they're learning about each other during all of this, that there are questions being asked specifically about emotions and future focused goals. I think social distancing does not need to mean socially isolating, and we have to make sure we fight that we don't cross that line. Emily, did you know that the single most important factor in balancing out traumatic events is actually one caring adult? You probably did know that.
I did know that, but I'm glad you got to share that with our audience. And you know,
Yeah.
Courtney, it's possible that I learned it from you before.
It's powerful, and people get intimidated or maybe overwhelmed in times like this, but understand that one caring adult still is and always will be the most important factor in somebody's life. And so take time to think about that one youth that's either been on your heart or before all of this had difficulties even before this crisis, and then reach out to them. Lean in and ask questions that are open-ended, which basically means they don't require a yes or no answer. And then at the end of the day, I think sometimes the most overwhelming part for people is, what if I don't know how to help? And I'm telling you, listening is the most powerful thing you can do. So at the end of the day, if you lean in and reach out to somebody and into that relationship, and there are difficult emotions being shared, which during this time we know there probably will be, just listen. And you don't need to find a solution unless there is an easy solution to be found. Resist the urge to give advice, and then you can say, I'm sorry, that sounds like a really difficult thing you're going through. Is there anything I can do to help? And that in itself is one of the most powerful things that we can do, utilizing social emotional skills right now to make sure that we're not isolating each other further.
That's a great reminder. Thank you.
Yeah.
So as you told us in the beginning, the youth that you serve through the Treehouse Program at Next Chapter are already experiencing trauma.
Yes.
So how is this COVID-19 crisis impacting them?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Emily, because although incarceration impacts 1 out of every 6 households in the state of Minnesota, we don't think about that. That's a lot of households. I also believe that incarceration is an underlining factor in so many families that are also experiencing issues with substance abuse, involvement in social services, free and reduced lunch, school behavioral issues. But it's something we very rarely talk about. And I think it's because the stigma of it allows us to slip into this narrative of us versus them. And the interesting thing about that is sort of this us are those with criminal histories that just haven't been caught, and them, those with criminal histories that have. Because if we're being honest, every single one of us has done something illegal in our lives. It's just some of us got caught and some of us didn't. And so it's an incredibly prevalent factor, and trauma is directly connected to that in a lot of ways, but we don't talk about it. So that makes the families we serve one of the most isolated populations on any given day normally. So because of that, this crisis has really been both self-isolating and then forced isolating onto the families and the teens that we work with. And they've been pushed kind of further into the shadows. But I also think this crisis has allowed others to really kind of be highlighted into what it means to live with challenges and barriers to getting your needs met. I think more than anything, that's what those of us who don't generally know what that means may have experienced a little taste of that during this crisis, of having a challenge and not being sure how I can get this need met because of the times that we're in. And so my greatest fear, of course, is that instead of leaning in to these youth and families during this time, that we're kind of pushing them further into isolation. And I think that although for some of us, this quarantine is kind of more of an annoyance than anything else, for some, this quarantine is actually quite dangerous. And so I think, especially those that are being impacted by trauma, ongoing trauma, and we need to be aware of that when we kind of poke fun of working from home or homeschooling our kids, or that we might mean it harmlessly, but that language can be incredibly divisive for some of us who are living in a state of uncertainty and desolation as a result of this crisis. And those families are kind of everywhere in this community. We maybe just didn't recognize it.
That's a really important reminder. So is there anything else, last thoughts that you want to leave us with to make sure that people understand Next Chapter Ministries, the Treehouse Program, and what you do to support youth well-being in our community?
Yeah, I guess just know that we haven't stopped. So this crisis has not stopped us. We have continued to serve the families in the same capacity that we have before, even though it might look differently. And so I would say, even amidst this, that every single person has something to contribute to the community still. We do not have to isolate. And so I would say reach out to United Way or reach out to Next Chapter. If you're not really sure, how can I contribute even amidst this crisis? And we will give you some really great examples of how you can be of service to your community still.
Awesome. That is for sure. We know our community is better when we're working together. And that's why United Way is so proud to fight for our community's youth alongside Next Chapter Ministries. So I hope everybody watching at home learned more about what we can do when we live united. And thank you so much for being with me virtually today, Courtney. I hope we can see each other in person again sometime.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to those pastries.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Emily. You too. Bye, guys.